Well, there's no question that the negatives associated with Reverend Jesse Jackson, with Reverend Al Sharpton, are so much higher than those associated now with Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. But the irony, of course, is that when he lived, the negatives associated with Dr. King were huge. Now he was a foul stench in the nostrils of mainstream America. He was a pariah to mainstream white America. But once he was murdered, the sweet scent of martyrdom swept away all of the foul smell of, Dr. King's social and moral crusades. So now he's been elevated. And the danger in that, of course, is that all the stuff that was said about Dr. King that's negative has been airbrushed out of his iconography. And what remains is the unblemished portrait of a man who was perfect in all ways. Well, if he's so perfect and beloved, why was he murdered? And not even, 40 years ago. And why is it that America continues to fail to both embody his ideals and to employ them and to fulfill the dream he had about America being fair and equal and just for all people, regardless of color or race or skin or national origin? And he might have added, I think, sexual origin, sexual orientation, and the like. So when you think about that, and you think about where King is and was, and now how he's being celebrated, you see there's a lot of manipulation, distortion going on, and everything negative that was said about Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton was said about Dr. King. Oh, you're camera hungry. All you're interested in is seeing your names in light. The younger people in SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, were hard on Dr. King, young black people for the most part, but they're an interracial coalition of especially blacks and Jews. But the young black people were hard on calling the Lord behind his back. The Lord is here. The Lord, Martin Luther King Jr., yeah. Yeah, he wants all the camera time. We do all the hard work, and he comes in and he takes the glory for what we do. King, of course, was enormously guilty and guilt-stricken, I should say, as a result of being featured as the central leader of African American social quests and black freedom pursuits. But at the same time, he was still highly elevated and celebrated. And there was a lot of resentment among the rank and file workers who were out there doing a lot of the hard work in SNCC and other places. So all the bad stuff said about Reverend Jesse Jackson and Reverend Al Sharpton was said about King, that he was in it for the money, that he didn't want human rights, he wanted civil rights, and civil rights were against the best interests of the nation. So all the malarkey that is said about Jackson and about Sharpton was certainly said about King, and we tend to forget that. So the negatives that Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton now endure must be put in context. And when we do that, we'll see, yep, the same stuff was said about King, the same kind of beliefs people had. If you read the newspapers, before he was martyred and before he was murdered, they doubted what Dr. King was doing. They were highly critical of him for his opposition to the war in Vietnam. Major papers, the Washington Post, the New York Times, major magazines, Time, Newsweek, and U.S. News and World Report, all were relatively critical of Dr. King. And many black leaders turned against him. Roy Wilkins from the NAACP turned against him, criticized Dr. King for his criticism of the war in Vietnam. So did the National Urban League's Whitney Young. Many people felt that Dr. King was not on the right path and was doing a great disservice and damage to the black freedom struggle. So when I think about all of that, I think that Reverend Jackson and Reverend Sharpton are to be applauded for the durability that they've showed and displayed, and for working so long. Dr. King had a career of vocation about, 12 years? Jesse Jackson's been on the battlefield, so to speak, for 40 years. That's enormously important and striking, and we have to give credit where credit is due. Barack Obama is a different kind of figure. Barack Obama is not a prophet, but a politician and a presidential candidate. So Barack Obama can't do the same things that Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton do. Those gentlemen do different things because they're prophets. What thus saith the Lord? They speak out against the inequalities that prevail. Presidential candidates, as Barack Obama himself have said, respond to the demand of agitators for change. So the change comes, he said, from the bottom up, not from the top down. He responded that way when he was asked by a reporter with Blitzer on CNN why Martin Luther King Jr. would endorse your candidacy. He said he wouldn't. Mr. Obama. He said Martin Luther King Jr. would get the American people to hold me accountable as president. And that's an enormously important thing. So there would be no Barack Obama without a Jesse Jackson. Jesse Jackson had to be rough and brutal, kicking down the door, so that Barack Obama could walk through it gracefully, with aplomb and a debonair style, and be able to articulate calmly and reasonably what he believes. The reason he's able to be that calm and reasonable is because Jesse Jackson had to be loud and insistent upon America grappling with some of the serious and systemic social ills that the society had yet to overcome.